You're listening to Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hello, dear readers, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club. And this is the time of year that we love so much because maybe you're going to have some time off for the summer. Maybe you're going to hit the road, fly somewhere, go on a boat. Either way, you want to carve out some time so that you can read some of the good summer books that come out and ignore all of the humans in your life just for a little bit. It's okay. We all have permission to do that. So top of your summer reading list has got to be dun, 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 Drowning by TJ Newman. And I'm so excited. TJ is joining us here in studio. It was last summer when we first had the pleasure of meeting when you were on your book tour for your debut novel, which was Falling, which was an instant bestseller. And basically your entire life has changed one summer to the next. So thank you for slumming it and coming back to talk to me. That's a treat. And congratulations.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me back on now for our second book, which is, yeah, you're right. It's been a whirlwind. Everything in my life has completely changed, and it's wild. It's been absolutely wild.
It's hard to fathom, I guess, the change that has gone on for you, because it was so charming to talk to you last summer to hear kind of about the efforts to get to publication and all of the rejections and all of the kind of ups and downs. It was so relatable and so inspiring to hear about your journey from bookseller down the road from the station at a Changing Hands to flight attendant to the idea that changed everything. And your fortitude and sticking with it clearly was worthwhile because people went crazy for this book and it was phenomenal. Is it hard to enjoy that success? Because I imagine you immediately had to sit down and get going on Drowning. This was a quick turn.
Absolutely. It was a quick turnaround. There's a great quote by a musician. I forget who said it, but he said something to the effect of, you have your whole life to write your first album and you have 6 months to write the follow-up.
Right.
So yeah, it's been an absolute whirlwind. I'm still enjoying it though. I mean, I'm living my dream come true. I'm a full-time writer, and I had a blast writing this book. The expectations were high. It was very scary at first, but in the end, once I sort of got over the fear of it and just said, you know, this is an opportunity, and opportunities like this don't come up all that often. As you said, you know, my background leading up to where I am now is in failure. 41 agents rejected my first novel that went on to be, debut at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. So the fact that any of this is happening, I pinch myself daily, and any fear that I had going into writing this book with the high expectations, the feeling of gratitude and knowing that this opportunity, doesn't come all the time and doesn't come easy, that overruled that fear.
It's got to be just such a mental trip, because this is your moment to prove that wasn't a fluke. You weren't, just this one incredible story in you, but that you could do this and do this again, and having the time constraints and, the constant feedback and all of that. Once you move past it, I mean, you just have to tell yourself, okay, I believe that I can do this. I know that I can. I got to say, I mean, this book completely rocked me. It was so fantastic. It is so powerful, and it not only delivered everything that Falling did, but I thought it was so much more of an emotional gut punch ride. I feel like I cried 7 to 10, 11, 12 times.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I should have kept a running tally of how many boxes of tissues I went through writing it. So when I hear a reader say, I sobbed at this part and I cried at this part, I'm like, oh, thank God I'm not the only one that's, emotionally, I love that response.
It was, to me, it was unbelievable. And so you showed in Falling that you're able to create a thriller that has us on the edge of our seats. It's nail biting, you're page turning. Many people said, I finished this book in one day or in one weekend, because you just have to know what happened. And I know my husband and I kind of equally had that experience. But this had another layer to it, or many more layers to it. And pardon the pun, like depth, because of where the story goes in Drowning. But I just want to know, at first, when you were coming up with your idea, how you were planning, or what inspired weaving this in, because it's pretty heavily dealing with an exploration of grief and kind of how that frames our place in the world and how we handle stress and how we navigate everything.
Absolutely. You know, when I was figuring out what my follow-up would be, what my next story would be, the only thing that I knew for sure was that it had to be bigger. In every capacity, in every regard, it had to be bigger than Falling. It had to have more action, higher stakes, more drama, more conflict, and I knew that it had to have more heart. And as soon as I started writing it, that became apparent that this story would not work if it was not at its core an emotional story of grief and loss and survival and hope and a family coming back together and love. This story would not be the story it needed to be if that was not the focus of what it was. The rest of it, you know, the setup of it, you know, a plane that crashes into the ocean and then sinks with people, you know, trapped inside and then is teetering on, you know, the edge of a cliff, like, that's the setup. And that's a huge, big spectacle, but that's not what the book is about. And I realized that pretty much as soon as I started putting pen to paper, that readers are not going to want to read 300 pages just of explosions and crashes and water and peril and scary. You know, that's not going to work for 300 pages. It had to be about something more. It had to be about love and hope and survival.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting because I heard you say recently that your pen name is your name, but it's a it's a gender neutral name, right? So the reader doesn't know if this is a female author or male author. TJ could be anybody, and that I'm sure that the research shows that male readers buy books written by men and they don't buy books written by women. And I have no doubt that is well researched and a stat that probably will never change. So that is very clever. But to me, it was so relevant or so obvious that the female layer of storytelling that is woven into this and is really what made this book work so well, because it gives you all of that blockbuster sensibility, but it just gave so much tender, raw emotion.
Thank you for that. And you know what? I am doing my darndest to reverse that stat, or to at least, you know, put a dent in it, because you're completely right. You know, there's not many women writing action thrillers. They're phenomenal female writers in the thriller landscape, the mystery landscape, I mean, crime writing landscape, just amazing female authors. But in the action thriller landscape, which is the stories that I love, the stories that I am interested in, you know, that's what I grew up reading and watching. That's the way my brain thinks. That's the type of story that I want to tell. But when I look around, there's not really a place for me. You know, there's not many women writing stories like that. And I look back at those 41 rejections that I had from agents, and I can't help but wonder, did that play a factor into it? That they wouldn't know what to do with me? Because I am a woman writing in a male-dominated genre. Mm-hmm. But to your point, I agree with you. I think that my perspective is different. And so I do think that I bring a unique lens to the action thriller genre, and the readers are being receptive to it. Mm-hmm. I think people are really enjoying not just explosions and you know, high stakes drama being the only thing that's the selling point. Yeah. They're responding to that beating heart. When I see all these incredible reviews, you know, on Goodreads, or, you know, someone tags me in an Instagram post, they're talking about the characters. They're talking about, the relationships, the human aspect of these people. The rest of it, the spectacle, is just sort of the setup. And I think that writing as a woman and writing as a daughter and an aunt and someone who, has a strong maternal instinct, I think that brings, some fresh coloring to a story like this.
Yeah. And you managed to make us so invested in really all of the characters, not just the key, not just the focus of the storyline. So there's just such great character development in this intense circumstance. So set up the circumstance. And one of the things that amazes me about this style and how you're able to do this at this high level is how quickly things go to crap. We're not, you're used to sometimes, a book. I love reading thrillers. If you're reading a domestic thriller, something's a little funky in the neighborhood, but it takes us a while maybe to get to, what's going to go wrong? This is what's going to happen. Okay, now I know. This jumps out immediately, yet you're able to keep us at the edge of our seats the entire time. So what goes wrong just, a couple minutes into this flight?
Well, it starts with the first sentence. The first sentence, our protagonist, Will Kent, opens his eyes, looks out the window of the aircraft, and sees the engine explode. That's the first sentence.
I had to do a double take, and then I'm like, okay, wait, am I misunderstanding? I mean, it's just so wild. It's so wild, and I think somebody who is a less talented writer would never be able to know where to go with your storytelling from there, right? It's like, wait, I needed to save that.
I think when I was writing this story and I was trying to figure out, part of the challenge of writing this was, how do I wrangle this much story into something cohesive and coherent that's only 300 pages long? And I realized the way to do that was exactly what you said. Just drop them into it. Just drop them into it straight from the get-go. And the first, I think 5 or 6 chapters are just the incident that happens on the crash, and then the evacuation on the surface, and then the sinking plane. And I knew that I had to get that set, and I had to front load it. And I decided for 5 or 6 chapters to just never let the reader take a breath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
relentless, just absolutely relentless. And then I followed it up right after that with a chapter that let the reader breathe for a second. We're now on dry land. We're, at the foothills of a beautiful mountain range. We're with the calm before the storm. Mm-hmm. And so then the rest of the crafting of the book was sort of just writing that up and down of how do you maintain the tension while letting your reader have a break, and then just when they think they're safe, bringing them back in. Mm-hmm. And so it's that undulating wave of tension that is it was spectacularly difficult and a really fun challenge with this book.
Oh, man, it is so, so good. Okay, so when you were a flight attendant, tell me about when you're introduced to the idea of a ditch or last ditch or whatever. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, a ditching, that's the aviation term for an emergency landing on water. We're taught it in initial training, and it's an extensive training. We get in a pool. We get in a pool. We do we build the raft. We put on the life vest. We truly feel what it would be like to try to load onto a raft and get things situated on the water. Mm-hmm. And then every year in recurrent training, flight attendants have once a year recurrent training. We come back and we don't get in the pool again. That's just for the initial, but we do the life vest. We build a survival tent. We put the little canopy up. We do the whole thing to do a dress rehearsal because that's what training is a dress rehearsal of what we would do in the event that something goes wrong.
Wow, it is. The book is so dramatic. What do you want to tell the listeners about the plot? I mean, where this story goes when we begin with watching an engine explode?
Absolutely, yeah. So it starts there. It starts with an engine exploding on the wing, and then the story is of the rescue of that flight. A flight that goes from tries to go from Honolulu to San Francisco, but 6 minutes after takeoff, crashes, ditches into the ocean. The passengers, they immediately evacuate until another explosion, causes those who didn't get out in time to shut the doors. But it's too late, and the plane floods and sinks, with 12 people trapped inside, including a father and his 11-year-old daughter. So now their only hope of survival lies with an elite rescue team on the surface, led by her mother and his soon-to-be ex-wife.
Oh my gosh, there's just, it's the intensity is, I cannot just make sure that you have time to unwind when you're reading this book afterwards, because you're going to be pacing and grabbing the Kleenex and walking and biting your nails and all of the things. It is that good and that gripping. The research, I also was just kind of marveling at the level of research that must have gone into this, because there is a lot of engineering, a lot of science, a lot of information that is, through the course of the story. I don't know anything about these industries. Sure feels believable to me. I mean, I took everything for, yes, absolutely, that could happen. So how much time, how did you really map out just the process of all of this for yourself, knowing that you were writing on a timeline really for the first time, knowing that there's just, that part of the big check that and the book deal from before is get this out. This needs to be a summer blockbuster. But this must have taken a lot of research.
It did. And, it was a fascinating process going from the way that I wrote Falling to the way that I wrote Drowning. So when I wrote Falling, I was a full-time flight attendant. I wrote much of that book by hand in the forward galley on red eyes while the passengers slept. I also wrote that book as a pantser, as we call them in the writing community. You can have a pantser or a plotter. And a pantser is someone who writes a book by the seat of their pants. They don't know what's going to happen. They just sort of put pen to paper and just see where it goes from there. And that's exactly what I did with Falling, because I'd never written a story like that, and I didn't know what the story was. So I was like, well, I'll start with the concept and then write these characters in and out of, their own problems. That book took me a few years to write, and it took me, 30-some drafts to get the story right. I knew going into this book I would not have that luxury. So I had to...
We'll see you in 5 summers from now, not 1 summer from now.
Exactly. So I knew that I had to change and become what they call a plotter, which is someone who plots the story out ahead of time. So I front-loaded all my research, and I outlined extensively for this book and knew exactly what the story was and exactly where I was headed and exactly what was happening plot-wise when I started writing.
Okay.
So all the research that I did in the beginning, I spoke to engineers. I spoke to a contact in the military who helped me with all the SRDRS, the submarine rescue system. I got scuba certified myself because I knew that. Look, I know a plane backwards, right? I flew for 10 years. I spent more time on an aircraft than I did in my own home. So I feel very comfortable and at home on a plane. The rest of the world of this story, I didn't know much of anything about. So I really had to find a way to, here's my pun, immerse myself in it. And one of the things I did was I got scuba certified. And I'm so glad that I did because, one, it was a lot of fun and it was really cool and I loved it. But it was also one of those things where until you're doing it, you don't fully realize, like, this is like walking on the moon. Like, this is a totally different world than up here on land. It's a completely different experience, and I knew that as much as I could get that real world experience, I needed to, because that authenticity would have to come through. There's a passage in there where one of the rescue divers is when they're going down to the plane, he's describing his first dive that he took as a kid and how it made him feel and what he was thinking and the way that changed how he views being underwater. That was my experience. That was my first dive. That was exactly what was going through my brain the first time that, I went under and breathed underwater, which is a wild concept.
Yeah.
So the research was really fun. And I just tried to get as immersed again, as I could.
And it's worth noting, if you're listening from elsewhere, she lives in the desert. So
This is true. This is true. It is a challenge. But to that point, also, we have pools here in the desert. And so I spent a tremendous amount of time when I was writing this book in the pool and also in the bathtub. Whenever I would sort of hit a roadblock, I mean it. I would get in the pool and I would go swim, and it would, I'd swim laps in the pool, and it would sort of be like almost like a swimming meditation, and something would kind of unlock and I'd, figure out a way out of the problem that I couldn't figure out. I also, like I said, I spent a lot of time in the bathtub. I had a toy model airplane, like a scale model, plastic scale model airplane, and I would take it into the bathtub, and I would like visualize what the plane would look like on the surface of the water, and then what it would look like when it sank. There's another passage in there where Will, the protagonist, he describes the plane and their circumstances, which is, submerged underwater, full of water. He describes it as like a water bottle tipped on its side. And he used that as like a visual, well, here's a water bottle right here. I can actually do it. There's a visual aid. Yeah. So it's like, if this is the fuselage basically, and this is the air bubble up here, and as it tilts, the air bubble shifts and moves, and that's where the passengers are, trapped in that little air bubble up there. That all came about because I was in the bathtub with a water bottle trying to visualize, well, if a plane was, what would it look like? And so that's how, I was playing around with things like that, because I'm a visual person. I'm a visual learner. So it helped me to kind of visualize what this crazy plot would look like if it actually played out.
Well, and for those people who do scuba dive, I mean, they say you do find out a lot about yourself, I think, when you realize, okay, can I be calm in this very unnatural experience, calm enough to then see the beauty in it all. And then there are some of us who know I would never do this because I know I couldn't be calm enough. I know that I couldn't be. I just couldn't be. So that becomes important too when people are, trying to figure out how to participate in maybe their own rescue.
Absolutely. And it was, having exactly what you're describing it was really helpful also in understanding the stakes and the state with which these passengers would be in the entire time. Because like you said, you're scuba diving, you've got, secondary and tertiary safety measures. It's all a very, safe endeavor. That being said, you're still underwater. And you can't breathe underwater. If something does go wrong, the margin of error is pretty slim. And that's the state that the passengers are in the entire time they're in that plane. Is like, yeah, there's an air bubble. If the ground shifts, they're toast. If something happens to the air bubble, they're toast. And so it's 300 pages also of that sort of, underlining hum of tension that has to be there. This idea of, you can never forget where the stakes are in a story like that. They have to be ever present throughout the whole story.
It's those moments that you imagine, of course, your life is flashing in front of your eyes, your regrets, your I wish I would have done this or that, or who's the last person you want to be able to contact, all of that stuff. What did you leave unsaid that you wish you would have said? And it's just an intense exploration of that.
Absolutely, because that goes back to what we were talking about before, and that sure, explosions and chaos and spectacle is exciting and fun, but you talk to anyone who's have a near-death experience, they say their life flashes before their eyes. They're not thinking about the explosion and the fire. They're thinking about what they didn't say. They're thinking about what they did say. They're thinking about their family. They're thinking about their friends. They're thinking about their life. And that's what I knew the focus of this book had to be. It had to be about what people do when they are faced unexpectedly with their mortality. What does that moment look like? And these passengers had several hours, because the book takes place over, one afternoon. They had several hours to really dig into that and see what does come up when you are facing that moment. What does come up? And I think it's been fun with both of my books to bring these to readers, and that, these books, they feature ordinary people, right? People like you and me. People that travel on a plane every day. Ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances on the worst day of their lives. And when it's a world that we know, we're on planes, we know this world, it's easier to put yourself in that position. And I think as a reader, you know, when we look at a story and we go, well, what is he going to do? What is this character going to do? When you read a story like this, it's a real short step to go, but what would I do? And I think that that sort of closes the distance from fiction and reality. And I think it makes it, a little bit more of an intense and personal read.
Mm-hmm. Although I'm not as knowledgeable or brilliant as Will, so thankfully he would be my choice for a companion versus a lot of people. Tell me about how you crafted this character.
Will, how did I craft that character? I wanted a know-it-all. I wanted a know-it-all who knew he's an engineer and he's got his daughter on board. And so his number one priority is to protect her and to make sure that that she is safe. Combine that with a know-it-all control freak and you've got instant tension right there with everybody else on board and everybody topside trying to lead this rescue mission, because if your priority is to protect this person and you think you've got the best idea, but your hands are also tied because you're trapped in a plane at the bottom of the ocean, it was just easy to see what his character would be. And I liked adding in that element also of, you know, the conflict with, you know, the topside rescue teams and that, who is this guy? Just some engineer. Why are we listening to him? I kind of used as sort of a inspiration for it a little bit, Jeff Goldblum's character in Independence Day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That sort of just, you know, guy who nobody's really listening to him, but
until they realize
he's got the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So now as you're on this ride, you get to take a breath. You get to travel and talk about this book and see it go out into the world and see it embraced, I imagine, again, by especially like the flying community that really just went wild to support you the last go round. What do you expect this to feel like versus last time?
Last time, it was still the tail end of the pandemic, so there wasn't a lot of events going on. A lot of bookstores weren't hosting events, so it was sort of an abbreviated tour. I did 4 different events at bookstores. This time I'm doing 12. I can't wait. I'm so excited. That's my favorite part, is being in a bookstore. I was an indie bookseller. I worked at Changing Hands, which is also where my first event will be for this book, just as it was for Falling. That's my favorite part of the process, is being with people in a bookstore, with readers, you know, talking about this and talking about stories. You know, writing and reading, they're solitary activities, but we're all experiencing it together. So that idea that you get to come together in a place as magical as a bookstore and share something that you did by yourself, but somebody else did by themselves, and you get to experience it together, it's a magical thing. And so I am so excited for that tour. I'm gonna be exhausted, but also too, you know, I look at it and go, this is what I know. I was a flight attendant. I'm used to being in a different city every night.
Right.
I'm used to planes. I'm used to no sleep. I'm used to being, you know, fully comprised of nothing but coffee. So this is actually, you know, feeling normal and natural.
This is your wheelhouse. Yeah. You should be able to do a carry-on and look good and feel, I mean, as good as anybody, right?
If there's one thing I know how to do, it's pack a suitcase. So, yep, I'm feeling ready.
So, please, on our next visit, you can walk me through that, because I'm an overpacker and I'm an overpacker and then don't have really what I need. I'm one of those, which is the worst.
Do 5 of what you don't need and none of what you do.
Exactly. Well, it is. I just cannot recommend this book enough. It is incredible. And I was just so happy that I wasn't trying to do anything else while I was reading it, because it, without question, would take over your life, and it deserves all of the attention. So the release is Memorial Day weekend, correct? Or
May 30th.
May 30th.
Yep, it's out Tuesday, May 30th. You can pre-order it now, but Tuesday, May 30th is when it's out. And the night before that, the 29th, I have an event at Changing Hands. And then on publication day, I have an event at Poisoned Pen. So 2 local bookstores, 2 absolute institutions in the literary community. I'm so excited and so proud to be going to both of them.
And I'm glad that they're embracing you so much because, this is bragging rights. We got to keep you here in the Valley. Last thing, of course, we all read those headlines about the big blockbuster bidding war for the movie rights to falling. So that dang pandemic, did that delay things a little bit?
It's still moving forward. Okay. I think that's just the movie world. That's just Hollywood. I've learned that there's about 4 billion decisions that have to be made between book and movie, and I'm just thrilled that it got a movie deal, and so did Drowning, which
did already.
Drowning did. It had a if it was even possible, it had an even bigger, crazier bidding war experience in which I spent 6 days in which I did not leave my house. I just stayed in my house and was on the phone and was on Zooms and was answering emails and also just waiting, on deck just to see what was going to happen, because it was the craziest. The book got out in Hollywood, and all of a sudden Steven Spielberg's reading it, and Alfonso Cuarón, and Nicole Kidman wants it, and all of these names that I'm just like, my agent would call me and say this, and I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, I remember he called me once, and we could only talk for like 30 seconds at a time because he was on the phone literally nonstop for 6 days straight. I would be on the phone with him, and I'd hear, another phone in the background ringing, and he'd be like, I gotta go, I gotta answer this. But one time he called me and he said, okay, and we finished talking about what we were talking about, and he's like, oh, by the way, Steven Spielberg has your book, and he's reading it right now, and I have a conversation with him tomorrow. I gotta go. Bye. Yeah, and I just, he hangs up the phone, and I'm just standing there with the phone to my ear, like, there's 2 Steven Spielbergs, right? Surely you're talking about one in, like, Boise. Like, not the Steven Spielberg, the man who's, like, inspired my entire creative existence, not him. Like, he's reading something I wrote. Oh, it was insane. And then another time, God, this whole week was just full of the craziest moments. Another time he called and he said, he had told me, we're probably going to be on Zooms at some point. So just be ready, just get ready. It'll probably be tomorrow or the day after that. But just know that that's coming up. Prepare yourself mentally. So I was sort of, aware of this. And then he calls and he's like, okay, probably going to be on a Zoom with Nicole Kidman in about 15 minutes. What? So I'll call you back. And then hangs up. Yeah, exactly. Your response was exactly mine. It was like, wait, what? And it's so funny, Olivia, because I feel like
you're like, hair and makeup? Anybody? Help.
Thank you.
Just like put out the flare.
You get it. Because literally he tells me this. I hang up the phone and I'm standing there, and the first thought that comes to my mind is, I got to wash my hair. I've got 50. I'm in sweatpants. I'm in writer mode, right? I'm in sweatpants and no hair and makeup. That's the writer's uniform, right? And he tells me in 15 minutes I'm going to be on a call with
the ethereal goddess Nicole Kidman.
literally an ethereal goddess Nicole Kidman.
That's insane.
And the first thought in my mind was, I gotta wash my hair. Yeah. I can't meet Nicole Kidman with dirty hair.
She can't take me seriously.
Exactly. I don't. Exactly.
I gotta look like I can put stuff together to put stuff together.
Exactly. But that's like the level of where my brain was at. Was none of this. It was just so surreal that I have 15 minutes and I'm planning on washing my hair and doing. It's just it was wild.
Wow.
But I know. At the end of the week though, Warner Brothers. It's Warner Brothers. That's who we went with. So
wow,
I know.
So Falling was Universal.
Falling was Universal, working title, and Drowning is Warner Brothers. I know.
And does that mean that we have a person attached as well, or
I'm always aware of the fact that the door will come like bursting open with someone saying, you're not allowed to say anything.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping mum on everything because I've signed so much stuff that I'm just like, I'm keeping mum on everything. But it's all moving forward, and it's so exciting.
Wow. Well, whoever is in charge of bringing this to screen has a major job ahead of them, because there's a lot.
It's epic. It's pretty.
It is. That's exactly the word.
I wrote the movie in my mind, I'm like I said earlier, I'm a visual person, and I see everything, and that's why it's so gratifying whenever a reader says, I could see that. It was like, watching a movie. I'm like,
yes,
that's awesome, because that's That's how I see it. That's
and
how I
that
see
is
it.
a very unique quality to your writing, and it really is. It really is. It is like reading a movie.
Thank you.
But of course, the book's always better. So it's best of best. T.J. Newman, the book is drowning. Everybody's going to be talking about it, so don't let them ruin anything for you. Read it right away. Get it on pre-order, and just give yourself an entire day. Congratulations. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.
This is Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.